this today so he can educate us on them. So before I talk too much, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Mr. Steve. Hope you're doing well today, Mr. Steve, and the floor is yours, sir.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, I after I got back to Okinawa from Vietnam, I got a letter from Don Dugan, who was working for USAID in Laos, and he had known my senior medic in Vietnam, Doug Hardy, and asked Doug Hardy to come to Laos to work for USAID. Doug said he could not. He had to return back to the States and didn't want to go to Laos. And he recommended me. And then Don Dugan said, if you're good enough for Doug, you're good enough for me. And that's how it all started. And so I said, yes, I'd like to come to Laos, work for USAID. And he said, well, Don said it takes a while. So I extended in Okinawa for 4 more months, ended up going to the Philippines for a couple of those months. And finally, I got a letter from Don saying, yeah, USAID's going to hire you. Take your discharge, go back home. So I did that. And I discharged and went back to Chicago and waited to hear from USAID. I had to go through another top secret security clearance, which I guess took some of that time, but returning to Chicago in May, and it was August before I heard from USAID, and USAID said, report to Washington, you're hired, basically. So I got to Washington, and I was in a class of about 14 people there for about 2 weeks, and it was just paperwork, getting a diplomatic passport, an American Express card, some briefings. I was not a typical USAID employee at that time. The rest of this crew were going to different missions around the world. So right before the end of my 2 weeks, I was pulled out of the class for about a half day, and I got my top secret briefing, which was that I was to run the village health program in northern Laos, which was run by USAID Public Health Division. But my top secret duty was to train SGU, Special Guerrilla Unit medics, and to perform search and rescue for downed and Allied air crews. So that was the top secret part of the mission. So I arrived in Laos, carried my Browning high power in my briefcase on the airplane, loaded over to Laos, and got to Vientiane, met Don Dugan. He showed me around a bit. I had to do some more paperwork and processing. So I was in Vientiane for 3 days. Next, I'm up in Santong, ready to go to work. And Stan Mani, another medic, he was an Air Force paracommando. He showed me around Samtong, Longchen, those areas. And that took about 2 or 3 days. And then I started work. And work was that I had about 100 medics in 70 dispensaries all over northern Laos. And they were primarily Hmong. Majority were Hmong. A smaller percentage were Lao Tung, which were equivalent to mountain yards in Vietnam. And they're now known as Khmu. At that time, the Hmong were known as Mayo and now known as Hmong. Anyway, then we had very few upland Lao medics working. So my day-to-day job was to take supplies out to these dispensaries and usually load a porter with enough for 3 dispensaries and land at the dispensary, meet with the medic, check on what he was doing, give him some on-the-job training, check his records, check his medical supplies, and then resupply him. And then move on to the next. And after those 3 dispensaries, go back to Samtong, load the airplane up, and do it again. So I'd probably make 15 to 20 takeoff and landings a day. And that was how I operated the whole time I was in Samtong. Now, the Hmong were very primitive people. They were animistic, slash and burn farmers, and they believed in spirits, or P, good spirits, and Dad, the evil spirits. And they had no written language until the very early 50s when a French priest developed Romanized alphabet, popular alphabet. Yeah, Romanized popular alphabet. So here was a people that had no written language until the 50s. And they, again, everything was based on family and clan. Clan came first. There was a lot of inter-clan rivalries. There was the difference between the green and white Hmong. But anyway, we made the operation work. So after Samtong fell in March 1970, we moved to Ban Song. And there we had a big warehouse, probably hundreds of $1,000s worth of medicine there. And here I was, 24 years old, thought I was hot shit, been ex-special forces. And now I'm responsible for working with training these 100 or so medics. Previously in the Army, I'd probably only the largest unit I commanded was a squad. So anyway, it was a learning experience. I thought I was pretty sharp, but again, here I was just a kid. For example, Don Dugan was probably late 30s, early 40s. And most of the people that I worked with were older than I was, especially Pop Buell, who was the area coordinator for Military Region 2. And he was quite a guy, a farmer, Indiana farmer, came over to Laos with the International Voluntary Services, and then went on to USAID and was the area coordinator for Military Region 2, which was Singkwang and Huapan provinces. And this was the same area, Region Military 2, that was commanded by General Vang. So after we went to Ban Song, I then ended up with 2 aircraft daily. I had a Pilatus Porter and a Jet Ranger. So I preferred to travel in the Jet Ranger and then move most of the supplies by Porter. Some of my medics were very good. I mean, I had a good medical supervisor by the name of Lee Chai, and he was my right-hand man. We traveled everywhere together. Because I'd only been in Vientiane Chen 3 days, I had no Lao language, no training. I was just thrown in there. So I had to use an interpreter. And most of the time, we were dealing with Hmong, which was a difficult language, more difficult than Lao. At any rate, so Lee Chai was my right-hand man. And then we had 3 other medics that were called the supervisors. And 2 of them were Hmong, Li Dang and Lo Vang. And then we had the 3rd one, whose name was Nun Chanita. And he was a Khmu or Lao Tung, and also the same basic ethnicity as the Montagnards in Laos. And he was a very sharp young guy. And both Lo Vang and Tao Num are still alive. Of all those senior medics, those 2 are still alive. In fact, I met with Lo Vang last Memorial Day in Sheboygan at the Lao Hmong and American Veterans Memorial. Again, though, in MR2 is pretty much a CIA operation, and they were based out of Longchen, which was just over the mountain from Samtong and probably 35 miles up the road from Ban Song. And CIA was based there. The Ravens, the forward air control, Air Force forward air controllers were based there. A good number of T-28s flown by Hmong were there. And of course, there was a large CIA operation. And I got to know a few of the CIA men very well. Lyle Brown was one. Hugh Tovar, who was chief of station, I used to meet with him at the restaurant before taking off in the morning to go up to Ban Song. I should go back. When we were at Samtong, we lived there, and I would stay up there for 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks, come back to Vientiane Chen for a day or 2, and then go back up. And I lived in a house right next to the hospital with Blaine Jensen, who was the assistant area coordinator, and Albert Faure, a French mechanic, who was a former French lead engineer that was at Dien Bien Phu. At any rate, so we'd, at Bon Son, we went back and forth by air every day. And the ambassador didn't want anyone staying, or didn't want people to stay up there routinely. I did stay in the villages on occasion with either Pop or with just Leach Medic, and I would go out and stay in a village. But most nights we returned to Vientiane. Because SOG was top secret, I never mentioned or told anyone I was at SOG, and basically, I don't think the agency guys knew that I was ex-SOG and, had been around. Some of these agency guys, or most of the ones at Longsheng, were ex-smoke jumpers, had a 6 months training at the farm, and others, there were a couple Marines, maybe one or two ex-Army, but for the most part, people that I wasn't comfortable talking with, and they probably weren't comfortable talking with me, thinking I was a typical USAIDer. For example, George Bacon was stationed at Lima Site 32, where I had a dispensary at the end of the airstrip. So when I went in there, I would see George, and he was usually reading a pocketbook or brushing his teeth. And I thought he was a bit strange and never really talked to him very much. And had I known he had been a SOG medic at CCN, and, of course, I was a SOG medic also, I'm sure we would have become great friends. But again, because of the top secret security clearance surrounding SOG, I never mentioned or talked to anybody about it. But anyway, there were some good agency guys that I got along very well with, and one was Lyle Brown, who was on the cover of Convoy's book, standing near the bombed out tank on Skyline Ridge. So Hugh Tovar would meet with me in the morning before we'd fly up north, and once a week or once every 2 weeks, and would just talk about what was going on up north. And I really had a lot of respect for Hugh, and again for people like him and like Lyle Brown. But mainly I wanted to talk about the Hmong. And the Hmong, again, were a primitive people, came to this country in 75 and later, and they've done remarkably well. When I lived in Wisconsin, which was a large Hmong population, usually the top 10% of every high school class was Hmong, usually Hmong girls. Again, thinking that they only had a written language for the past 70 odd years, it was amazing that they did so well in America. Over 1,200 Hmong have received advanced degrees, and many are doctors and lawyers. Many also have been elected to city, county, state, and federal office. So I've been very impressed with what the Hmong have done in this country. I'm also, I have also been involved with trying to help Hmong veterans become established in this country. And together with Chapter 73 of the Special Forces Association, we trained Hmong, got them uniforms, trained them on how to march. And they marched in all the local parades on Memorial Day and Veterans Day. So they again, we helped them get established through not only the Special Forces Association, but Vietnam Veterans of America and other organizations. In I would say early on, I began speaking with the Hmong veterans about some sort of recognition for their service and trying to gather names of those who had died. There was no official records. And that led then on to the idea of establishing a memorial, which we finally did and dedicated in 2005 in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And on that memorial, it not only lists the names of Hmong killed, but also the Hmong that served in the secret war, and also all the special forces killed in Laos, all the Air America Air Force, Continental Air Services men that were killed in Laos. So it was quite an accomplishment. I'm very proud of that memorial and the role I played in getting it established and up and going. I did make a DVD on the Hmong, which I sold in order to raise money, which actually raised $35,000 for that memorial. And again, a beautiful site. And this last May on Memorial Day, I was the guest speaker, honored to be the featured speaker at the memorial, which was attended by 300 or 400 people. And now I guess I'm ready, open for questions.
All right.